Hi, this is Radical Liberation, broadcasting from a new setup due to the COVID-19 coronavirus, Chinese virus, whatever we're calling it. I am at home, and as of this morning, actually have decent internet, so hopefully this will go really well. Thanks to AT&T for fixing me up this morning after years of not getting anywhere with them. But I'm thankful it's done now. We also have Mad Mercenary here from Australia.
Hello.
And as suggested by the show title, we're going to talk about shortages of goods and an abundance of money. So I actually would like to go in the opposite direction than the title implies and talk a little bit about shortages of goods. Here's a phrase I ran into while hunting for something that I'll mention later that is not something I realized was in shortage. Out of stock due to high demand, the manufacturer's site said. I wonder how much we're going to see this phrase and how long we're going to see it. I'm very curious about that. Here's some interesting data points. Found an article mentioning that in February in Hong Kong, an armed gang tried to steal not money, not gold bars, not crown jewels, and not even Baby Yoda figurines, but 600 rolls of toilet paper. Now, I might have mentioned this last time, but I kind of got the idea that the hysteria about toilet paper goes back to a situation that was actually kind of specific to Hong Kong and needn't have applied to the rest of the world. They had something that there was an actual issue with the factory that makes toilet paper for Hong Kong or something like that. And they found that out and people started really getting toilet paper. People in the US were sending toilet paper to Hong Kong, crazy stuff. And supposedly that's why everybody got it in their mind that the one thing you've got to look for as the coronavirus comes to your country is toilet paper, as opposed to other things that you could imagine people would be worried about. But that seems to be the situation. I don't think I've been able to purchase toilet paper for a couple weeks, I think. We've actually had people donate some to our family, which was nice because there's 10 of us. So some of the things that I've seen having shortages: toilet paper, paper towels. I guess they're close enough to toilet paper. On the medical side, ventilators, which seem to be key for severe cases of coronavirus. Drugs that we think maybe might help with COVID-19, like hydroxychloroquine, running out of that very quickly, which is a problem for some people who actually were using it for lupus and arthritis. That touches close to home because my wife, though she has not been using hydroxychloroquine, my wife has had arthritis since she was 27, around the time we got married. Then personal protective equipment. I never knew this acronym, PPE, but suddenly I see it everywhere as if we're all supposed to know this. It means personal protective equipment, refers to like surgical masks and I guess surgical gloves, things like this to protect you from infection when dealing with possibly infected people. I saw one data point said that respiratory masks used to be $1.20 each, but black market, unofficial market, whatever, asking for about $15 each for those.
Yep.
So yeah, little price markup on those. COVID-19 tests to see if you actually are positive with this virus. I think they're having a hard time coming up with enough of those. Frozen chicken. I actually saw this when I went to Costco, our bulk store around, one of the bulk stores around here. They said they had chicken, not a lot of it, and it said you could only take one bag each member per day. And then here's the one I ran into where I saw the out of stock due to high demand. Webcams. Took me a minute to figure out why that would be. I was looking at it in a way not exactly related to what's going on. I set up this office and realized I really wish I had a webcam so I wouldn't have to use my laptop camera and mess up my setup just when I'm doing a stream. And I could have a webcam on top of my monitor that I'm usually facing. So I went looking, and I could not find any webcams available for purchase, certainly not at a reasonable price. One that was recommended to me by Poe. Don and Poe were giving me recommendations, Don the pleb and Poe the person. Poe recommended one that's $80 list price. And I found it offered on Amazon for $250. So why would webcams be in a shortage? Because a bunch of people are working from home. That's my theory.
Well, we come to the idea of shortages and price controls and all that sort of stuff. The market is reflecting the high demand for these products. Maybe not in the supermarket, because the supermarkets are keeping their prices relatively the same, but in other spheres like the black market or online. So you can't stop the supply demand from, like, the supply and demand curves from interacting. You can't stop that by simply saying, all right, the price is now going to be this. They will express themselves just in different realms.
Right. Yeah. So I'd put it this way. When you put a price gouging law in place, it shifts from rationing by the price mechanism. That means, the price goes up until people stop filling their trucks with toilet paper because it's too expensive to do that, right? And you see toilet paper on the shelves just at a higher price. So it shifts from rationing by the price mechanism to rationing by weighting, or by who you know, or by luck, or some other kind of thing. But that's actually, that's sort of the surface issue. I wanted to go a little bit deeper, since this is the deep lore Econ chat, and think through a little bit what this means. So a price gouging law establishes a legal price ceiling, right? No one can go above a certain price. And I don't know that this is always being done by law. I think in some cases there's just sort of social pressure that if the grocery, I saw some videos from England where the corner market was charging more for hand sanitizer, and people were outraged and getting angry at them. So there's social pressure. There's also laws in place against price gouging. So it establishes a ceiling on the price, so the price can't go above a certain rate. So most of the time, the price isn't going to go above that anyway, so the law has no effect, or the social pressure has no effect. But in times like these, the natural price, the demand goes up and the supply is what it is, at least at first. We have the supply we had when we started the crisis, but the demand has gone up. So naturally, the price would go up above the price ceiling. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, as we mentioned, it means that at that artificially low price, the shelves are going to be totally cleared, and you're going to go day after day and you're not going to be able to find this stuff, which is what I've been seeing. But that's just the first order effect, sort of the consumer facing effect that is annoying and in your face. The deeper effect, though, comes when we understand what Austrians call the stages of production, right?
Yep.
So with the stages of production, the price that the consumer pays ripples through the production process. So, I buy the toilet paper at the store. That indicates to the retailer that they should get more toilet paper. That indicates to the wholesaler they should get more toilet paper from the people who manufacture it. Indicates the manufacturer. The manufacturer needs to step up their production. That means they need more fuel. Maybe they need more. Ultimately, they need to retool their factories or build new factories. So they need new machines. The demand for those toilet paper making machines results in a higher price for certain tools, certain steel, certain kinds of metal, maybe, and so on and so forth. So the real problem, in my view, is it is extremely annoying to go and just see the prices, the shelves empty, knowing that you'd happily pay double or triple the price if they would allow that to happen, to get the toilet paper or whatever it is. But that's not the real damage. The real damage is that if the price was allowed to rise, that price would ripple through the stages of production and people would step stuff up. Now, I just gave the simple analysis, which is the sort of the existing players are getting signaled by the price that they should make more. But the other thing is, what do you call it? Substitution effects, you might say. So we were using the paper that goes into toilet paper to make paper towels and tissues and so on and so forth. Well, the prices tell us manufacturers that, I was making mostly paper towels or exclusively paper towels. Maybe I should start making some toilet paper now. And so people who maybe weren't even making toilet paper start making toilet paper because they see the high price of the high demand for toilet paper as signaled by the price. That's sort of the obvious thing, but it just gets so much more complex, right? There's an alternative use for the metal that goes into the machines that is used in factories that make toilet paper. If we allow the prices to ripple through, then people who could have used that metal for something else, it instead goes to the toilet paper manufacturer. With the price gouging laws, with the price ceiling, that price signal is not allowed to go through. And the manufacturer would love to make more toilet paper, but it's too expensive. He can't get a hold of the machinery he needs or the metal to make the machinery or whatever. So I think the naive view is, well, look, we just, people know more toilet paper needs to be made, and we can keep the prices capped with a price ceiling, but people just know to do the right thing or something like that. No, that's the whole problem. That's where people don't understand how complicated an advanced economy like ours is, how many alternative uses there are for things, and how the price mechanism is coordinating all of this in complicated ways that no one understands. So when we put these price ceilings in place, the price controls, right? When we put these price controls in place through price gouging laws, it just messes up the whole system's ability to respond. And so what I would have expected without price ceilings of whatever sort, through law or social pressure, whatever, what I would have expected is a very temporary shortage, or I'm sorry, not a shortage, very temporary higher prices for toilet paper and surgical masks and so forth, which would be met with a response in higher supply. And then the prices would not immediately go back to where they were, but start to trend downward again very quickly. I mean, within weeks in a functioning market economy or less, we should see the larger demand, larger supply come into play, and the prices start to trend downward again. As it is, I suspect we're going to see empty shelves for some time to come if prices are not allowed to do their job. So that's what I wanted to say about the shortages. Sorry, I went on a little tear there. It's been bugging me.
No, it's completely fine. And the price signals tell entrepreneurs and they tell business people where the most efficient and where the most demand is. So we talk about, let's take it even one more step beyond that. When the crisis passes and the demand is no longer there, the machinery and the new machinery and the new production techniques that were there to produce more toilet paper, well, now because there's no longer such a demand for it, the price will be lower because there's more quantity. There's more supply, sorry. So the quantity has gone up. Therefore, the price will go down.
Right.
So now at the end of this crisis, because we've allowed the market mechanism to work, the price of toilet paper, let's say, will have gone down because there's more supply. Now that's saying that these firms are responsible and they didn't take out huge amounts of debt to create the new production, and they were financially reasonable and all that sort of stuff. That's dependent, but usually you go back to this normal levels or lower.
Right. So how do we segue to our other big topic? I mean, okay, so
How about we say the government isn't financially reasonable, and this is why?
Right. So let me say this, that the paradox I brought up when I tweeted about this stream is to say that the government, as we know, and as we'll discuss shortly, and discussed a little bit last week, is just turning on the spigot of money. Everybody gets bailed out. It's like the bailouts from 10 years ago, except it's not just for the banks. It's for everybody gets a bailout, right? I've been seeing that, not just small businesses, but independent contractors. I mean, if you can't get money from the government at this point, you're just not trying, as far as I can tell. So they're pouring all this money out, and yet at the same time, I can't go and buy toilet paper. So, the shelves are empty of the goods I need. So that, to me, from a certain simplistic point of view, feels paradoxical, right? It's like, well, there's all this money. There's an abundance of money, so we should all be rich, right? We should all be able to get what we want. But then we're having these shortages of real goods, like surgical masks and ventilators and paper towels and toilet paper and so forth. Well, why isn't all the money they're pumping in resulting in the stuff we need, right? Because that's really like what we would want, is that the actions the government would take would address the felt needs that we're having right now, the things that people are really needing. Right. Toilet paper's silly. I bring it up because it's funny. But, chicken, ventilators, drugs that might help with the COVID-19. I would say these things, some of them are people's lives depend on them. We'd really like the system, the economy, the government, whatever. We'd like it all to work somehow so that those needs are met and quick, right?
Yeah, very much so. And, this just comes back to, you can't just print value. Value is created through trade, through actually adding value to someone else by working. You can't just print money and say, hey, we have this value now, and this is what happened. This is Say's law. Demand is enabled by supply. It's enabled by production. So you create something, you add value, then you go and buy stuff because you created that value. You can't just print it. Have I lost Redlib?
No, sorry. I just wanted to put up your fun picture because I really love it, as a segue into our next topic.
Well, I'm gonna get that video up.
Yes, please do. Yeah. So I think what you're going to be driving at with this is that for those who are paying attention and thinking about things in the midst of all this chaos, we're having some rather revealing moments. And it's interesting. It's being interpreted in different ways. As you may know, there's a leftist in Australia that I'm a great fan of, Mad Mercenary, named Caitlin Johnston. Well, what she's concluding this, because she thinks she's very good on foreign policy and things like this. But when it comes to economics, well, she's a leftist, and we know what that means. She thinks money is a magical thing in our minds, and it can just sort of work any way we want it to. I mean, she literally says, I'm pretty much paraphrasing what she says. So what she has concluded from what she's saying is, oh, well, the government could just like hand us money all the time, and they just didn't because they were greedy, right? So that's what she's getting out of it. But I think there's some other things we could get out of it. Shall we go right to this clip?
I mean, it's so perverse what they're gonna do and what this guy is doing. So give me one sec.
Okay, go ahead.
You don't need to. Your ATM is safe. Your banks are safe. There's enough system, and there's an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. We will do whatever we need to do cash in the bank. You don't need to. Your bank.
You guys get that?
Yeah, I'm hoping that that came.
This guy, his name is, hold on, trying to get the name of this bastard. Neil Kashirki, president of the Federal Reserve in Minneapolis.
Okay. Yeah, there's a real quick geek point here. Somebody said
That
it
didn't
didn't
go
come
through.
through well. Anyway, quote the key line in case the audio didn't come through for somebody.
We have infinite amount of money. This is essentially what he said. So don't worry.
Right. Sorry. So quick rabbit hole. The way the Federal Reserve was set up is that there's actually multiple Federal Reserve banks. There's one in St. Louis, where I am, in fact. There's a St. Louis Federal Reserve, a New York Federal Reserve, Minneapolis Federal Reserve. I forget how many. There's not that many. Half a dozen, something like that, I think. The chairman is the one we usually hear about, right? Bernanke or whoever it is right now, I forget.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like this comment from Lawrence Time. So he said we can just right. That is exactly what he said, right?
I mean, they're not even hiding this anymore. They're just saying, we'll print money, we'll lubricate the system, we'll make sure everyone has enough money so they can go out and spend and not save and not have, actual stable financial systems. It's so perverse that I'll share another link right now. This is from the Federal Reserve. So let me just see if I can get it. Share. You seen that?
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, this bit.
Yeah, read that out, please.
The board reduced reserve requirement ratios to 0%. So that means when you put a deposit of your savings into the bank and the bank lends that out, they have to keep a reserve ratio. They have to keep a certain percent of your money in the bank so that they have certain backup. They have if someone wants to take their money out, they can come and take some savings out of the equivalent amount.
And to be fair, I don't have the research on this, but I'm going to guess that the reserve requirements have gotten more lax over time.
Yeah.
That is the banks are required to hold less and less in reserve over time. That's been happening anyway over the long run, right?
Yeah, it used to be 100%. So you used to have to back it all up. Then it was dropped to 50%, and now for the last 3 or 4, 5 decades, it's been at 10%. And now we're gone to 0. You don't need to hold any savings. Just lend it out to anyone and everyone. Stimulate the economy. And who cares about the consequences? Who cares if it's profitable? We're going to a China model. It's just about employment. It is not about actual stable financial systems anymore. It's just about employment.
I think it's worth noting that Austrians, some Austrians, not all, are known for being 100% reserves, right? That, like, Rothbard was a 100% reserve guy. That means not that money can't be loaned, but that if your money is going to be loaned, that would be because you were investing it and you're taking a risk. If you're just storing your money at the bank, I just have my checking account that I operate out of, and I'm giving the bank some money, expecting to get it back anytime I want, that should be 100% reserves. That is, the role of the bank in that case would literally just be to keep it safe. It wouldn't be to loan it out or anything, right? So that's considered one of the sort of more hardcore Austrian positions. Well, it's just worth noting that what we just saw was the Fed taking the absolute opposite position of that, 0% reserves. So this is Bizarro Rothbard, right? This is the Rothbard.
And this isn't the like some conspiracy rag. This is their website. They are announcing this publicly. They don't care anymore. There is no limit to how much they just want consumption, short-term consumption, to drive the economy to the next year. They're not worried about long-term. They're just worried about the next day.
Right. So Let's see if we've covered our bases, because I think even usually we've been going 2 weeks between shows. This time it was just 1 week. And even in that week, I think some of the things you're sharing have happened, right? I believe that 0% reserve announcement was in the last week. Do you have the date on it?
It's
Yeah,
been within the last 4 days.
Yeah. So this is things are changing on a week by week basis, because they're just going nuts with this stuff. So
Well,
0% reserve. Go ahead.
You want something that's very within the last 24 hours. I'll bring this up. Let's see. This one,
Yeah.
balance sheets. Share. This was a by these lovely people. Yeah. Oh. Yardeni Research Incorporated by Dr. Edward Yardeni and Mali Quintana. I'm assuming that's how. Anyway, table of contents.
Sorry. I hadn't shared it. It's up now.
Okay, so these are the total assets of major central banks. So remember, central banks, the way they build their balance sheets is through open market operations and buying treasuries and introducing cash into the system. That cash is then used for whatever purposes the financial institutions need. Have a look at the red line, Fed. So this was from the 26th. So my yesterday, your today. Look at that red line. It just goes up. This is all the stimulus that's being pumped into the system. We were here. We were starting to reduce the balance sheet. There was calls for higher interest rates, slowly raising it, lowering the balance sheets, trying to get to some sort of normal footing after the giant raise that happened throughout the early teens. But now we've just abandoned that and we're going straight up. We're just.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we need to. If we go back to the left side of that red line, we see a huge jump up. That was that initial bailout, QE, whatever they called it back then, right? About 12 years ago, due to the as a response to the 2008 financial crisis.
I can get the Fed just by itself if I can.
And then they just kept going, really. Until you're saying it was very recently that they were trying to wind this down, until the coronavirus came along.
Here it is, the Fed. This is the Fed, 2008. After 2008, huge jump up with Obama's stimulus package. And then we were stagnating throughout the 2012, 2013. So we introduced more and more and more. And this is the lowering of interest rates and the 0% interest rates that we had for a while under the Fed. Then they were talking about normalizing the balance sheet and normalizing interest rates. So they raised them and they started to get rid of Fed assets. Then coronavirus hits. Oh, it's just the flu. We're just going to introduce a little bit of liquidity. Holy crap, we got to close the borders. And now we're literally off the box. We are off the scale.
Yeah. I like the drama of it going outside of the chart. That's fun.
Yeah.
and pretty appropriate, I gather. Because, we had talked about a proposed 1.5 trillion package or whatever, but isn't it up to 2 trillion now? And now it's happening. Like it's gone through the U.S. Congress and so forth.
It's 2 trillion fiscal policy, and I think 9 trillion in monetary.
Just crazy.
Yeah. It's madness. There's no other word for it.
Okay, I want to make sure we have plenty of time to respond to things, because we've got. I'm sort of out of the corner of my eye seeing some great questions here. So, what else did we want to cover before we get into? I'm sorry. Say it again. You'll put it in the chat.
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yes. What else did you want to cover in terms of the money helicopter? before we get into some questions? And the questions may allow us to get into some of the other things we wanted to get into, so we don't have to cover everything before we go to the chat.
Very true. Just with the money markets, because of the instability in the market, people are holding on to their cash, especially U.S. dollars, and so I've been reading a couple articles from the South China Morning Post, and they've been saying that small and medium-sized firms no longer have the loans and funds to keep going because the U.S. dollar market is drying up. So the Chinese Communist Party has raised the limit of the amount of loans that you can take out, and they've basically put the grease on and eased all the mechanisms to try and get liquidity into their system. As we mentioned in our China episode, that every single business in China is completely full of debt and doesn't have a stable business structure.
And they were, to be fair, they were trying to unwind, right? Because weren't they trying to do something about the shadow banking system and so forth?
Yeah, but now they can't because there's no U.S. dollars and there's no foreign currency running through the system anymore. So the only businesses that are really getting any loans at the moment are the big businesses backed by the government. Because everyone thinks, hey, the Chinese government will back those businesses up.
Mm-hmm. Right. The SOEs, the state-owned enterprise, and there's outright state-owned, and then there's like partially owned by the state. But they're all sort of there's a spectrum there. But you've got ones that are pretty tightly tied up to the state, and so. What you end up with, and I think Academic Agent has been expressing similar concerns, what you end up with is what Marx thought that capitalism would lead to, right? But now it looks like they might do it through this crony capitalism, that is killing off smaller firms in favor of the larger firms that have connections to the state, right?
I mean, this will be blamed as the fall of capitalism and the reason capitalism doesn't work by all the socialists. But as we're pointing out, governments all over the world are manipulating the system. And if you think China is a free market economy, you're delusional. Anyway, let's get to some questions.
All right. Yeah. Let's. I'm going to go right back to the beginning here. Alessio says, I love inflation. And my response to that was, some people just like to watch the world burn. Anyway, okay. Okay, looking forward to what you have to say, and probably more nuanced than Peter Schiff's gold zealotry. For real, though, what's the best way to short the dollar right now? I don't know. Gold's probably not a terrible idea. Do you have any strong opinions on shorting the dollar?
Gold, silver, rare earth, property, like physical assets that you don't hold debt on.
Yeah, actual real goods, things that have real value, right? When all the paper becomes worthless, you want to have something that isn't paper. Land is not a terrible thing to land that isn't just debt, right? But land that you own outright is not a terrible asset, I would think. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, Charlemagne says, I'll send you my Logitech for $500. Thank you. Lawrence, I'd love to know how to say that name. Lawrence Timmy. Rationing by who has the biggest gun. Yeah, and I like these comments. Everybody, stop putting the price up on goods. Also, everybody, why you have no bog roll. Exactly. Let's see, give me a sec. Okay, we were talking about shortages and price price gouging laws. And Silly Sailor says there's a good Econ talk on this with Mike Munger. Econ talk. That's the one with Don Boudreau, right? I'm forgetting the name of the outfit. But if you look for literally Econ talk with no space, just like Silly Sailor put it, you'll get some nice content, some pretty sensible economic content. Yeah, so Robert Bloom says there actually isn't a greater demand for toilet paper. All that toilet paper is being hoarded to sell at higher prices later. Well, yeah, but I can't find any toilet paper for my family of 10 people. So there's a shortage due to people doing that hoarding that's real, even if their motivation for doing that hoarding ultimately doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Oh, sorry, saw you blip away. You're back now,
No
Madmer.
worries. I don't know what happened. So
Yeah. Anyway, any comments on Robert Bloom's point? Did you hear what I said?
no, I didn't. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just that I see what he's saying, but as it so happens, I can't get toilet paper for my family of 10, right? So
We have police at our supermarkets guarding toilet paper and toilet rolls. And making sure. I'm not kidding.
I didn't know that.
We had a debrief at my store saying that if people try and push other people to get stuff, we have to kick them out.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're working at a store?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they're telling you how to deal with the post-apocalyptic ravaging hordes, right?
We have by law now social distancing laws.
Right.
So you have to be 2 meters away from someone, or else you will get a fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, working in a store, it's the police are there, and people are very antsy at the moment. Let's just say that.
Here's Silly Sailor's comment. I wonder how many of the folks who complain about price gouging are willing to sell their homes for the same price they bought them at. I think I follow his point. Basically, the logic of price gouging sort of implies that
Profit is bad.
Yeah, prices just should remain the same, regardless of changing circumstances, you know? Right.
And let's talk about what happens if you don't raise the price. If you don't raise the price, people aren't able to adjust to demand needs and increase their production. If they can't increase their production, then there's a shortage. If there's a shortage, yes, the people who get the items for that lower price, it's good for them. But for the vast majority of people who aren't able to get that product anymore, it can be a death sentence. We saw this in hurricanes when people were looking to get jerry cans and fuel containers. People were saying, "Hey, they're price gouging. They're raising the prices on us." Well, why do you think they were doing that? And then when New York said, "Oh, you can't raise the price of these jerry cans," well, then there were no more jerry cans to go around to everyone, and people didn't have fuel, so they couldn't cook food in their homes. It was madness.
Lawrence Tim, there's actually two parts to this. When the crypto boom was a thing, NVIDIA ramped up GPU manufacturing massively. But because it took them 6 months to respond, they ended up losing money because the crypto crashed and they were stuck with hundreds of thousands of graphics cards they couldn't sell. Yeah, well, I mean, this is the nature of the economy. You try to anticipate, you try to respond. Timeliness becomes really key, as is indicated here. But this is why, we talk about the entrepreneur in an almost mystical way in economics, or Austrian economics at least, because they're the ones who somehow are able to forecast correctly and have the right thing at the right time and not too much of it, and in a way that makes them profit, right?
This is why there's risk associated with volatile markets, though. We know that crypto is a relatively volatile share.
Yep.
Stock, sorry. So if you're entering into that game and you're seeing the rise in demand because of a certain how do we say this? Certain not index, not issue. Oh, my English is failing me. Anyway, because of a certain thing, because it's rising for whatever reason, and you try and meet that demand in a volatile market, you understand the market you're getting into. You know the risk, and you take that aboard when you try and expand.
Lawrence Tim says it's almost like communism. Do you want 1,000 fur coats, or no? I want some bread. We are in a similar situation to the USSR. Well, I hope not. Like, I was actually seeing food missing from the shelves at first when in my area the panic started to set in, right? Say, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something, or maybe a week ago. I'm losing track of time. But then I went back just a week later or several days later, and there was plenty of food. There still was no toilet paper or paper towels, but there was plenty of food.
This goes back to, however, geographic position and your ability to grow food as a nation. So we didn't even have a drop in food. The price went up. It went up about double for fruit and veg and meat, but we were still able to feed ourselves. This is just anecdotally, but many of the foreign exchange students that we have at my university are Europeans and Italians specifically. They're saying that their families are struggling to find dairy products and vegetables and certain types like pork or lamb. They're struggling to find those products because they're not an agricultural nation and they're dependent on imports for food. If you're dependent on imports for food, then you close the border and restrict access to trade, well, you're going to run out of foodstuffs, aren't you? So the importance of having a nation that is self-sufficient in certain aspects like steel, energy, food, that can't be understated.
Overstated, I think you meant.
Oh, okay, overstated, sorry.
Idle Time says, LOL, no more fractional reserve banking. That's a good point. You can't call it fractional reserve banking when the reserve requirements is 0%. It's not fractional reserve banking anymore. I don't know what to call it.
That's true.
I don't know that we even have a word
for
it.
Reserve banking.
No reserve banking. 0% reserve banking. Yeah, this is like a new category in our thinking about monetary economics. Well, I don't know. Lawrence Tim says, to be honest, if they don't have 100% reserves, what difference does it make if they have zero?
Well, it depends on the risk and how much they're actually able to cope with if there's a run on the bank. So if they have like a 50% reserve ratio and there's a run on the bank, for example, they may be able to placate over time and calm the situation down so the economy doesn't go completely to hell. If they have zero, then they don't have any reserves and there's a run on the bank or there's a financial crisis, they have no way of dealing with it. They're completely exposed. All you're talking about here is their exposure to the market and to certain bank runs or institutional failure or whatever. That's why you have savings. That's why individuals have savings. Except we don't anymore.
Yeah, right. So Lawrence Tim wants to take on Rothbard. He says fiat currency is dead. Well, I don't think it's dead yet, but it is kind of scary. Rothbard is wrong, he says, since he would not have the means to impose that. He's talking about 100% reserves. Rothbard is awesome, but that point is merely wrong. One of the few points I will never understand, probably. Okay, so when Rothbard says there ought to be 100% reserve, what does he mean? In fact, here we go. Here's another comment from the same person. In Ancapistan, you could have a 0% reserve bank as long as it was not a violation of the non-aggression principle, i.e. it says they have no reserve in the contract. Well, I think that's the point. The point is that I think Rothbard's point is that without the government interference into banking, a bank would say, entrust your money to us and we will just hold on to it. And it will, your gold, let's put it this way. Entrust your gold to us. We will hold on to your gold and we will keep it safe and we will allow you to write checks on it and so forth. But otherwise, we will not loan it out. And if you need to take the gold out, it's here for you to take. any moment. All of our customers could come and take their gold, and we would have it. I think Rothbard's point is he believes that that bank, for that purpose, for storing your money as opposed to investing, for low risk storage of your gold, that bank is going to beat banks who don't hold on to any of your gold. The only reason that 100% reserve isn't competitive right now is because essentially the government interferes with the banking system and doesn't allow it.
Well, when a bank is bailed out, what's the point in worrying about risk?
Well, that's a good point. We have federal deposit insurance, FDIC here, and things like that, right? So
we have similar concepts from the Reserve Bank of Australia. I mean, you're right. A zero reserve bank could operate under Ancapistan. The problem is whether that is stable. People can enter into a contract knowing the risk, but whether that financial institution would last for any meaningful amount of time is the question. I don't think it would, because people want security.
Right, you're right. So what the FDIC does in the US, for example, and I assume there's similar things around the world, is that it socializes the risk, right?
Yes.
Rather than, a caveat lector, let the bank customer be careful to find a bank that is run in a responsible, stable way, that secures its assets so that they're not stolen or loaned out when they said they wouldn't loan them out, and so on and so forth. It'd be up to you to find somebody who you can trust, right? As it is, and you would bear the cost if you failed and you were the customer of a bank that was cheating you. You would just be out that money. That's what would happen in Ancapistan, right? But in our current situation, if the bank acts irresponsibly, well, there's the federal deposit insurance. Failing that, as we've seen, there's bailouts. Where the bailouts come from? Everyone. So now we're socializing the risk and socializing the loss, as opposed to letting it be borne by individuals who would be strongly then motivated to not make stupid decisions. Anyway, I don't know if that helps at all. Let's see. Rothbard isn't the whole Austrian school. Mises was a free banker. Sometimes I think the Mises Institute should be called the Rothbard Institute. Right, simply because the Mises Institute goes with Rothbard on that. But I don't think Mises is as far from Rothbard as you might think. A lot of work was done in this area after Mises. And so I think we just advanced. That's how I view it in this particular area. Okay, let's see. Okay, Lawrence says, New York Business Dem says, what's the alternative? Is the infrastructure for crypto in place yet? And Lawrence says, you can keep your money in crypto or gold and transfer small amounts into fiat as and when you need to spend it for now. It's less convenient, but safer. Yeah, I don't know what to think. I actually have not been watching the crypto. Have you paid any attention to like Bitcoin price or anything like that? Madmer?
Not crypto. I've been watching precious metals, and I've been watching property assets, especially within my area. But to me, crypto again is a fiat. It's a fiat stock. There's no actual backing to it apart from people's collective value. So, again, call me a Philistine, call me boomer, whatever. I preferred, especially in times of crisis, for there to be something backing, something physical, something that I can get my hands on in a time of trouble.
Idle Time says 9 trillion, that's half of the GDP. So he's saying that $9 trillion bailout, monetary and fiscal, is half of the US GDP for the year.
Yeah, I think that was, thinking back on it now, I think that was actually monetary and fiscal. So if there's 2 trillion in fiscal, that means that there's 7 trillion in monetary. So yes, a lot.
Charlemagne says, if a bank doesn't store any of your money, then it ceases to be a bank. Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's
just an investment institution at that point.
Right. If you step back from the labels that are used and think about what we really traditionally would mean by these labels, where could I get something like a traditional banking service of just storing my money and being able to give it back to me if I ask for it? It's hard to know if there's even such a service that exists. And maybe the closest you could get is using a storage locker, trying to be very careful to let them think that all you've stored is some old furniture that no one cares about, but actually you have some gold in there or something. Maybe that's the closest you could get, but that would be pretty insecure.
We have not my family particularly, or people I know, but I know people who have told me to say, hey, just go out to some park somewhere in the middle of the night, bury it.
Right.
To bury it, and you know it's there, no one else knows it's there.
It's not totally crazy.
If something happens, something wild happens, just go to the park, dig it up, and run.
Charlemagne also says, if infinite money will be printed and banks don't have to store any of it, is this the death knell of the dollar? Well, in the short term, what are we seeing? I mean, just because the dollar inflates, typically what happens is everybody inflates just as much, if not more. So the dollar still remains pretty strong. That's what I've seen.
Right, and this is where you go into several aspects. So people like Peter Schiff have said the dollar is going to die. This is the death knell of the dollar. I can see the argument for it. On the other hand, let's think about security and risk. Which is the most secure nation? America, which in a time of trouble, in a time of crisis, would have the most secure financial system in comparison. I'm not saying that the financial system as a whole is healthy. I'm saying in relative terms, which is healthier, which would be America. You don't want to invest in China. Europe is just about pretty much on the point of collapse. And what other major systems do you have left? You have Oceania, but you can't support a system on that. The only one left is America. So I would say, is the dollar healthy? Absolutely not. Is the dollar going to go down in value? Maybe. Is the dollar going to still remain important? Yes.
Yeah, it's not quite time for what Mises called the crack up boom when, after World War I, the German mark, they're doing wheelbarrows full of it to buy bread or whatever. I am not foreseeing that at this moment. And there's also this thing where they do all this handing money to banks, but then the banks don't actually loan it out. We saw that with the bailouts 12 years ago, right? They end up holding on to a lot of it and not actually, which means it doesn't ripple out into the economy as it effectively kind of doesn't expand the money supply in a weird way. It just sits there as to make the bank feel more secure or something. So yeah, bad things could happen at this point to the dollar. I'm not ready to call that yet, that the dollar is going down in flames just yet, though certainly they're not making decisions I would consider wise. Lawrence says
there's countervailing theories on the dollar. So people I forget their names, but there's a certain investor out there who's big on gold and that sort of stuff, who said when the dollar collapses, it will first go up and then dramatically down. So we could be in that sort of situation where the dollar is seen as secure, and it's in comparison to other markets out there and other currencies. So everyone rushes to a dollar, and then when the Fed and the fiscal policy comes in, and the inflation comes in, and people realize the dollar isn't worth as much as they thought, then the value of the dollar drops. So it could be that sort of situation. We'll just have to wait and see.
Lawrence says, if you buy gold in the UK, you don't pay VAT or capital gains tax, but you do on silver and platinum. So that's interesting. Gold somehow retains some statuses like money, I guess, right?
Right. I mean,
or
gold here for the first time in Australian history didn't just break 1700, which was like our previous high. It surpassed that and got to 1816. 2816. So it got to $2,816, which is crazy for us. We've never had gold at that high.
Say it again, 2,300 Australian?
No, 2,800.
2,800 Australian.
So
Wow.
it had never got past 2,700 before. Like it had skirted it during 2008, but never got past it. During this crisis, it got to 2,800.
Right. I wonder if there'll be some people who will take advantage of all these crazy price movements, and when the dust settles, they'll have made out like bandits, you know?
Well, there's currently a silver shortage around the world because of this crisis. So the silver market in comparison to the gold market is smaller, and silver coins like Perth Mint, Royal Canadian Mint, they're not able to sell any coins because they don't have any coins because everyone's bought them. So we're just waiting for the effects of that to be seen in the price. So we're in for a wild ride because people are starting to see that precious metals, perhaps crypto, again, I have my doubts about crypto, and property, physical assets actually mean something. Oh, and guns. Get some guns.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. Yeah, people are buying guns around here. Okay, Idle Time says, is there any coming back from this that would fly politically? I am feeling pretty black-pilled. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm black-pilled. It's a little hard to know what the shift will be. We tried to think about that a little bit last week on the show. I don't know. I don't have anything substantive to say to this right this moment, but I think he raises a good point, is how by coming back from this, I guess, how do we get back to something like what was normal, which was still pretty bad, but how do we not descend into total chaos as a result of actions?
From an Austrian point of view, we could ride a populist sort of wave. So we could say the big banks and the financial institutions have screwed you, which is true. They have taken your money. They have not had any reserve ratios, which is true. They have absolutely destroyed the financial system through their greed and through their manipulation of the markets, which is also true. Let's break up these banks. Let's let the market actually work. Let's get big business and big banks away from big government. None of what I've said there is false. It appeals to unions, that appeals to centrists, that appeals to the Austrians because they know what we're actually saying.
Right.
That usually will work if we ride that populist wave and we frame it not as, well, it's all the government's fault. We actually need to also target these financial institutions that we're doing wrong, because that resonates with people more. It's better optics.
Yeah, as Rothbard said, they're ripping us off. That was a favorite. Okay, let me try to see if there's a last few comments before we wrap up. Let's see. Robert Bloom says, those are supply chain issues. The price gouging laws just stop 800% increases. The prices do increase. The manufacturers just can't ramp up production fast enough. I've not seen higher prices in the stores for the items that I'm looking at. So
they're expressed in different markets. So they're not expressed in the stores. The stores want to keep a brand image, but they are expressed online. So in the black market and online, you see that the prices of hand sanitizers and face masks and toilet paper and toilet rolls, they've gone up there.
I should be checking eBay, for example.
Right.
Probably, right?
So, yeah, exactly. So it's not like the prices haven't gone up. It's just they've gone up in different areas. The market has expressed itself in a different way. It's the same thing with the Soviet Union. There was a single price for this sort of stuff. But if you go to a black market, there was a dynamic market, and the prices changed.
Right.
So,
yep. Alessio, who's from Italy, 5-star movement there. Politicians are talking about replacing the outdated capitalist system with state control. I am definitely seeing all the extremists, including the one, my sort, out there saying, here's our chance to really, have a radical change.
But we got to do it smart. This is like 2016. There was a massive chance for the libertarian movement to actually gain some steam and for fiscal responsibility and social liberalism to come through. But we squandered that opportunity by, going on the drugs and all that sort of stuff. It should be hardball message. These financial institutions have screwed you. We are with the people. We are for the people. And
Right.
using that sort of populist language to actually break up the government and the big banks.
Okay, Silly Sailor takes you on. He says self-sufficiency is a fetish. Autarky has been shown to be just as defunct an economic idea as price fixing. Subsistence farmers are self-sufficient. We don't have to dive into this topic because there's
we don't.
We have yet to really hash this out on the show. And
So I would say self-sufficiency works in certain circumstances, especially if you have internal trade, like internal free trade. Laissez-faire really works when there's trust. Negotiations and deals and trade is built on trust. If you don't have trust, you don't trade.
okay,
it's a really interesting topic, though. I don't want to just palm him off. It's like,
right.
I really wanted to engage with it. We just don't have time.
Yeah, we'll cover that another day. Silly Sailor also says, I agree deposit insurance is the problem. The reserve rates are a symptom. It doesn't even offer much more security. Look at Ayrshire bank collapse. Savers got 99%. I'm not getting the whole story here, but
me neither.
Okay, I don't know about that particular bank collapse. Okay, I just want to cover like one or two more things, and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see.
Self-sufficiency was tried. It was called Empire. It worked.
Charlemagne says, I guess if all monies are fake and gay, then none are.
Yes.
There is that's kind of what I was referring to. There is sometimes just a relative thing that if we really had gold as a functioning competition to these fiat currencies, it would defeat them. But when all you have is fiat currencies, then the fiat currency that is managed relatively more responsibly, like Germany used to manage theirs, say, before the EU, and the US manages theirs. And I mean, when I say relatively more responsibly, they still manage them terribly, But then you saw like what Italy did before the EU with their money. It was always, 5,000 lira to buy a candy bar or something, It's just worthless. Let's see. Anyway, that's funny.
What if you use that for toilet paper? When the EU collapses and there's a shortage of toilet paper, just use your euros. That's what we can sell them. That's financial advice right there.
Let's see. Speaking of Europe, time to bail out the Mediterranean again. Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece almost entirely rely on tourism. Meanwhile, the EU is fining Italy and Russia is sending aid. Yeah, there have been some interesting. We were talking about the effects on some of these things like the EU, cross-national, international type organizations. I think the EU is not coming out of this smelling good so far, from what I'm seeing. That's an interesting story to follow. Let's see. Speaking of the volatile markets, I've already made £200 so far, and I've already got 1,800 in the market for Disney and Apple, while they are low. Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if there's some opportunities to make money by making some smart moves right now.
Buy low, sell high. This will depend if this recovery is actual, like the stimulus is artificially creating a true recovery, or whether this is like 1929 when we had this bit of recovery, everything was looking good, and then the bottom just dropped out and we had this massive depression. Remembering that the crash and the depression were two separate instances. So we'll have to wait and see whether the crash will come. Like I said, hold your breath, wait. All we can do is see what happens.
I want to read this, but I don't know how to say that word that starts with H. Do you?
Sorry?
I've got a Silly Sailor thing up. What's that word that starts with H?
Hebrides?
You don't know either. I think it's Hebrides, maybe. I'm going to go with Hebrides. Radlib, plenty of toilet roll in store here. Bit of a drive to the Outer Hebrides, though. Yeah, so it's not shortages everywhere. Some people are, by geographic location, basically getting the rationing by luck working for them. Okay, well, let's stop for today. Any final thoughts?
It's all going to hell so far. We'll wait and see.
Well, I'm really happy because now I have a at-home setup that allows me to work well and actually stream from home, which I had not been able to do. When I tried, like on the Red Dwarf stream on Monday, it came out pretty bad. So, yeah.
Solution was correct. So good work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Hebrides. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's stop for now. And thanks, everybody. And it'll probably be 2 weeks again before we have another show. Though, if economic developments are particularly fascinating, maybe I can talk my wife into it. We also have had our schedules open up a bit. Usually scheduling between America and Australia has been quite difficult. It's been difficult for us to find times that are not too late for me or too early for Mad Merc. But things have become a little more flexible with all of the world shutting down. So we'll see how long that lasts. I think
we have a little bit of time.
We've got a couple more weeks left at least, I think, of all of this shelter in home or whatever various countries are calling it. But basically them trying to get all of us to stay home. So, all right. Good seeing y'all. Talk to you again soon. Bye.
Have a good one.